The night shift at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station was usually quiet, but tonight was different. Tom Wilson rubbed his tired eyes and looked again at the strange readings on his screen. The energy patterns near Jupiter made no sense. He frowned and leaned closer to the console, trying to make sense of the data. It was unlike anything he had seen before. "Hey, come look at this," he called out to his supervisor, Robert, who was sitting at a desk across the room. Robert, a veteran of many shifts, walked over with a coffee cup in hand. He studied the display, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of the anomaly. "Those aren't natural readings," Robert muttered, his voice tense. "Call Space Command." Tom nodded, quickly activating the communication systems. Within minutes, they were contacting Earth Space Command. The alarm bells began ringing as the Earth Space Rescue vessel Mercy powered up its engines. The crew of the Mercy had been preparing for an emergency response to whatever was out there. They didn't know what to expect, but they knew it was something big. Captain James stood on the bridge, watching as his crew moved with precision, preparing for their deployment. At 55 years old, James had seen nearly everything space could throw at them, or so he thought. He looked at his crew, steadying himself for whatever was ahead. "Almost all systems ready, Captain," reported Mike, the young pilot, his fingers moving quickly across the control panel. He was already plotting their course to Jupiter, looking at the strange energy signatures that had brought them here. "Take us out nice and steady," Captain James ordered. The engines hummed to life as the ship powered away from Earth's orbit, heading towards Jupiter. Even with their advanced engines, it would take the Mercy 12 hours to reach the location. During the long journey, the crew analyzed the readings from the monitoring station. Dr. Adams, the ship's science officer, pointed out something troubling. "Captain, these energy patterns, they're failing. Whatever's out there, it's running out of energy. If they need help, we need to hurry." Captain James nodded grimly. If someone was stranded, they had to reach them before it was too late. As they approached Jupiter's orbit, the crew fell silent. Through the main viewport, they saw something that defied belief. Floating in space, 15 massive ships drifted silently. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their sleek designs were nothing like human vessels, dark, imposing, with only faint emergency lights blinking across their hulls. "My God," whispered Mike, his voice filled with awe. "They're aliens?" Captain James took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had prepared for many challenges in his career, but this was different. "Send out the standard greeting package. All frequencies." The crew watched anxiously as their message beamed toward the alien fleet. Minutes passed, and just as the tension seemed unbearable, one of the ships flickered to life. It wasn't much, but the lights began to form patterns. At first, they were simple, almost random, but then they grew more complex. Dr. Adams quickly worked at her station, interpreting the signals. "Captain, they're using basic light sequences. It's like old ship signal lamps. They're asking for help." James moved closer to the viewport, studying the ship. "Can we communicate back the same way?" Dr. Adams nodded. "Yes, sir. Their pattern is simple enough for us to replicate. We can respond with the same kind of light sequences." For the next hour, the crew exchanged simple light signals with the alien ship. Slowly, the story began to emerge. The fleet wasn't a military force or an invader, it was a group of refugees, nearly 50,000 of them, fleeing from a dying star system. Their advanced quantum drive technology had malfunctioned, leaving them stranded in Earth's part of space, running on emergency power only. James felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. "How much time do they have?" he asked, his voice tight. Dr. Adams translated the response, her expression grim. "They have 72 hours before their life support fails completely." The captain stood quietly for a moment, considering the gravity of the situation. 50,000 lives, different species, different worlds, but lives nonetheless. He pressed the ship's communication button, his voice firm but filled with resolve. "This is Captain James to all crew. What we do in the next 3 days will be remembered forever. These people need our help. They've got technology we can barely understand, but right now that doesn't matter. What matters is that they're stranded. They're scared. And they're running out of time." He paused for a moment, glancing around at the faces of his crew. They were determined, unwavering. "We're going to save them. Not because we have to, but because we can. Because that's what humans do. Contact Earth and tell them we need every rescue ship, every power generator, and every engineer they can send. Let's show our new friends what humanity is capable of." The crew sprang into action. Orders were relayed, messages flew back to Earth, and the Mercy continued its approach toward the alien fleet. As they drew closer, James couldn't help but notice the lights on the alien ships beginning to blink on, But this time they weren't just signals. They were greetings. They were thanking them. Dr. Adams smiled as she monitored the communications. Captain, they're repeating one message over and over. I think they're saying thank you. James felt a lump form in his throat, but he didn't let it show. He knew the real work hadn't even started yet, but at that moment, something shifted. Oh, they weren't alone out here. They weren't just the humans, they were humanity, and humanity was here to help. Send them this message, James said quietly. Tell them, hold on. Help is coming. The Mercy's lights flashed the message across space, a simple promise from one species to another. The greatest rescue mission in human history had begun. Earth's response came faster than anyone expected. Within 6 hours, 5 more rescue ships had joined the Mercy near Jupiter, ready to assist. Captain James watched as they took position around the alien fleet, preparing to do what needed to be done. The radio officer called out, "Report from Earth Space Command, Captain. The emergency council meeting is starting now." Back on Earth, Admiral Stone addressed the world leaders in the Situation Room. The screens buzzed with tension as he outlined the crisis. "We have 50,000 refugees in those ships," he said, pointing to the latest images of the alien fleet. "Their main vessel holds most of their population, and they're running out of time." One of the leaders leaned forward. "What exactly is wrong with their ships?" Dr. Miller, Earth's leading space engineer, stepped up to answer. She pointed to a diagram on the screen. Their quantum drive malfunctioned, leaving them stranded. They've been unable to repair it with their own resources, and now their power systems are failing. Without assistance, they will run out of life support in less than 72 hours. The leaders exchanged worried glances, but Admiral Stone remained calm. "We're already sending the Mercy and 5 additional ships. Our engineers will be on the ground in less than 24 hours. We're going to make sure these people get the help they need." The room fell silent as the leaders nodded in agreement, ready to support the operation. There was no time to waste, and they knew humanity's response would make all the difference. As the Mercy and its fleet moved toward the alien ships, Captain James kept his focus on the task ahead. He knew the stakes were high, but one thing was certain: humanity had always found a way to rise to the occasion. The situation had grown more dire with each passing hour. The alien vessels, despite their immense size and technological marvel, were crippled by a failure in their power systems. Their technology, which relied on quantum drives, was far beyond anything humanity had ever developed, but something in the region of space they had entered had disrupted their systems. The quantum drives, once the lifeblood of these advanced ships, had malfunctioned in a way that humans couldn't fully understand. The alien leaders, with their tall forms and smooth blue-tinted skin, had come to rely on this exotic power source for every function of their ships. And now, despite their great knowledge and ingenuity, they were helpless. The situation had gone from bad to worse, and Earth was their only hope. In the Situation Room on Earth, a leader questioned the possibility of a quick fix. "Can't they fix it themselves?" he asked, his tone laced with frustration. Dr. Miller, Earth's leading engineer, shook her head slowly. "No," she replied, her voice heavy with the weight of the problem. "Their tools and spare parts require the same kind of power that's failing them. It's like having a car repair kit that needs gas to work, but you're already out of gas." The room fell silent as the implication of Miller's words sank in. These aliens, with their extraordinary technology, were stranded in space, unable to even fix their own power systems because their energy source was beyond their understanding, and even beyond their reach. The reality of the situation was clear. Without help, the refugees aboard these alien ships would die. Meanwhile, aboard the Mercy, Captain James and his crew had boarded the main alien vessel, hoping to find some way to help. They were wearing simple space suits, each carrying basic tools and testing equipment. The alien leaders greeted them in a dim hallway. The eerie stillness of the ship added to the sense of helplessness hanging in the air. The alien leaders were tall and slender, with smooth blue skin and 4 arms, features that were strange to human eyes but seemed normal to them. Despite their unusual appearance, the worry in their eyes was unmistakable. Through a series of light signals and simple gestures, the alien leaders guided James and his crew to the engine room. It was a massive, cavernous space, and the heart of the ship, the quantum drive, sat dark and silent. Beside it, emergency power units blinked with warning lights, their feeble energy output far from enough to keep the ship operational. Dr. Adams, the Mercy science officer, scanned the systems with Earth equipment, her brow furrowing with concern. "Captain, their backup power is failing faster than they thought. We don't have 72 hours, it's closer to 48, she reported, her voice tense. Captain James touched the alien engine with his gloved hand. It was cold to the touch, the familiar hum of power completely absent. He glanced around at the massive quantum drive and the surrounding equipment. "What about our power systems?" he asked, his voice heavy with the weight of the impossible challenge they faced. Dr. Adams glanced at the alien engineers, who were gesturing toward their systems in frustration. "Their technology needs specific, exotic matter to generate power," she explained. "Our generators are much simpler. They run on nuclear power or even diesel fuel, but theirs require something far more refined. It's like trying to power a quantum computer with a steam engine." James took in the situation, his mind racing. There was no way their technology could directly help these aliens, not without the proper fuel. But something caught his attention then, something that made him pause. As the alien captain spoke with Dr. Adams, James noticed small alien children huddled in a nearby room. They were wrapped in thermal blankets, trying to stay warm as the ship's heating system began to fail. The sight of them, fragile and vulnerable, stirred something in him. "Sometimes simple is better," James said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. He turned to the alien captain and pointed at the children. Then he pointed at his own ship's lights, making a warming gesture with his hands. The alien captain's expression softened, and he seemed to understand immediately. He made quick gestures to his engineers, and Dr. Adams translated their light signals. "They say their life support needs massive power to function properly. But," she hesitated, "they're willing to try our power systems even if they're less advanced." James nodded, a sense of determination sweeping over him. "Tell Earth we need every spare generator they can send. And get me the engineering team, we have an idea to test." The urgency in his voice was clear. The clock was ticking, and if humanity didn't act fast, the lives of 50,000 refugees could be lost. Back on Earth, the response came swiftly. Messages were sent to all corners of the globe, calling for every available resource to assist in the rescue mission. Earth's factories went into overdrive, producing generators and power converters that could potentially power the alien ships. Dr. Miller, with her team of engineers, worked tirelessly to adapt the technology to something that could be used by the alien vessels. James watched the children on the alien ship, their faces filled with quiet hope despite the bleakness of their situation. One of them, a small alien girl, waved at him with all four arms. James, behind the faceplate of his helmet, smiled and waved back. The gesture, simple but heartfelt, reminded him of what they were fighting for. They weren't just saving alien lives, they were showing the universe that humanity stood for compassion, for cooperation, for life. Dr. Adams sent the alien captain a message in light signals. "Sometimes the oldest solutions work best," it read. The alien captain's response was quick, flashing in a pattern of lights. "We trust you." On Earth, Admiral Stone concluded the emergency meeting with a firm declaration. "We have 48 hours to save 50,000 lives. I don't care if they're from another galaxy. We help people in trouble. That's what humans do." The world leaders, though anxious, all nodded in agreement. Within minutes, the global response was underway. Power plants prepared emergency generators, engineers gathered tools, and rescue teams suited up. The race to save the alien fleet had begun, but the hardest part still lay ahead: how to power the highly advanced alien technology with Earth's primitive equipment. The International Space Station became the testing ground for humanity's boldest rescue plan. Dr. Miller stood in the station's main lab, surrounded by both human and alien equipment. In one hand she held a simple power cable and in the other a small alien power crystal. The problem wasn't just about power, she explained. It's like trying to plug an American appliance into a European socket, but a million times more complicated. An alien engineer, who they had come to call Bluke because of his darker skin tone, moved his four arms in careful gestures. The light panel beside him flashed as he spoke. Dr. Adams translated, "Their ships need pure energy in quantum form. Our power is too rough. They say it's too basic." Dr. Miller nodded and grabbed a water filter from the station's supplies. "Tell them to watch this," she said. She poured dirty water into the filter, and clean water poured out the bottom. The alien's eyes widened as they grasped her meaning. "We don't need to make quantum energy," she continued. "We just need to clean up our power enough for their systems to use it." The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Earth's factories worked non-stop to build special power filters based on Dr. Miller's design. In space, the rescue fleet tested different power sources on a small alien shuttle. Captain James stood on the bridge of the Mercy watching the tests unfold. Another test had just failed. The shuttle's lights flickered and died, and through the radio Dr. Miller's voice cursed in frustration. 36 hours left, James reminded the crew, his voice steady but tense. How's it looking? Not good, came the response from Dr. Miller. The team had made progress but time was running out. Every second counted. James knew the fate of the refugees hung in the balance. Dr. Miller stood in the space station's control room, staring at the readings on her screen with growing concern. We can get power through the filters, she said, her voice tinged with frustration, but it's still not clean enough. The alien systems rejected it. She ran a hand over her face, exhaustion settling in after hours of non-stop work. Just then a sudden flurry of urgent light signals from Blue, the alien engineer, caught her attention. She quickly leaned forward, her translator screen blinking as it worked to process the incoming signals. Dr. Adams, who was sitting beside her, read the translation aloud. Wait, he's asking about the station's solar panels. He wants to know why they moved to follow the sun. James looked up from the display, confused. Basic solar tracking, he replied, his voice carrying the weight of his own fatigue. Why? More light signals flashed from Blue, and Dr. Adams translated quickly. He says their systems are like our solar panels. They expect power to come in specific patterns. We're giving them random energy, but they need rhythm. Suddenly, Dr. Miller's eyes lit up as the realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. She snapped her fingers. That's it, she exclaimed, barely able to contain her excitement. We don't need cleaner power, we need to give it to them in the right pattern. She turned to her team. Get me the nuclear plant designs from Earth, and I need someone who's good at music. Music? James asked, his brow furrowing in disbelief. Dr. Miller nodded. Their quantum drives work on waves, Captain. Just like music. We need to make our power flow in harmony with their systems. The next few hours transformed the International Space Station into an unlikely concert hall of energy. Human engineers, working side by side with Blue and his team of alien engineers, used principles of music theory to adjust the frequencies of the power they were sending. They treated electricity as though it were sound, carefully tuning it to match the rhythm and patterns the alien technology required. Every minor adjustment to the power signals was treated like fine-tuning an instrument, and the more they understood, the closer they got to their goal. Blue's team, with their understanding of quantum systems, guided the human engineers through the process. They seemed amazed by the simplicity of the solutions humans were proposing. Water filters, simple tools, and now the concept of applying music theory to power distribution. The alien engineers had worked with advanced technology for millennia, but they had never considered that the key to their survival could come from something as simple as rhythm. Test running now, Dr. Miller announced, her voice steady as she pushed a final button. Everyone in the control room watched in tense silence as energy flowed into the alien shuttle. The lights on the shuttle flickered and then hummed into life. The systems, which had previously rejected Earth's power, now accepted it as the power flowed in a harmonic pattern. The shuttle's engines slowly roared to life, and the crew's collective breath caught as they watched the alien ship come back online. It works, Dr. Miller shouted with excitement, pumping her fist into the air. It's working. She could barely believe it. The systems that had been so resistant to the power now hummed smoothly. But as quickly as the joy spread, Dr. Miller's mind turned back to the larger challenge. We'll need much more power for the main ships, she warned. Much more. Captain James didn't hesitate. Admiral, we have a working solution, but we need every nuclear plant and power station linked up. We need to create the biggest power symphony in human history. Admiral Stone's voice came back immediately, firm and unyielding. You'll have it. The world's power grid is yours. James nodded as he turned to the alien shuttle, which was now glowing steadily with Earth's power. More than just a simple test, this was proof that humanity's basic science that had long been considered primitive compared to the alien technology, could save an entire civilization. They had found a way to bridge the gap, to turn human knowledge into something that could give these refugees a chance at survival. Send word to all ships, James ordered, his voice steady with command. Tell them to prepare for full power transfer. We're about to perform humanity's first quantum concert. Dr. Miller looked around at her team, which now consisted of both humans and aliens working side by side. Let's hope they like our music, she said, smiling despite the gravity of the situation. She adjusted the power filters one last time, fine-tuning the delicate balance that had allowed the shuttle to receive the energy. The plan was working, but the real challenge had just begun. Now they needed to scale it up. The power grid on Earth had never been used in such a way before. Every major power plant on the planet was directed to send energy upward through a network of satellites, toward the rescue fleet near Jupiter. Dr. Miller watched her screen as the power readings began to climb. The flow of energy was steady, but they would need to monitor it closely as the process scaled up to the much larger ships. First test on the larger ship starting now, Dr. Miller announced, her voice calm but full of anticipation. Captain James and his crew watched anxiously through the viewing window as energy flowed into one of the smaller alien vessels. The ship's lights flickered to life, section by section. The interior of the ship lit up, and alien families huddled near the viewing ports, watching anxiously as the power flowed into their vessel. Blue, standing next to Dr. Miller, worked rapidly on the control panel, using his 4 arms to keep up with the demands of the system. Power at 20%, called out a technician from the back of the room. Filters holding steady. 30%. 40%, another technician reported, but then suddenly warning lights flashed across the control panels. The power flow became unstable. Blue's light signals turned frantic, and Dr. Miller's eyes widened as she saw the pattern unfolding. "Shut it down," she shouted. "Shut it down now." The power flow stopped immediately, and the lights on the alien ship dimmed, though they didn't go out completely. Dr. Miller let out a breath of relief. At least the ship hadn't completely lost power, but the data showed they had a serious problem. "What happened?" James asked, his voice filled with concern. Dr. Miller pointed at the readings. "The power harmonics worked fine on the shuttle," she explained. "But this ship is bigger. The energy patterns are distorted over larger distances. It's like sound in a huge concert hall. The notes echo and change." She turned to Blue, who was rapidly flashing his light signals in response. The translator struggled to keep up with the conversation, but eventually the message came through. "Our children's section needs stable power first. Their environmental needs are most critical." James looked out at the alien ship through the viewport. Even from a distance, he could see the small faces of the children pressed against the windows, staring out at the approaching rescue. They had less than 24 hours to get this right. "Dr. Miller," James said quietly, "what if we don't power the whole ship at once?" She looked up, puzzled. "In submarines," James explained, "when we lose main power, we restore it section by section. Start with the critical areas, then expand outward. Could we do something like that?" Dr. Miller's face lit up with realization. "Yes," she exclaimed. "Exactly like growing crystals. Start small, build the pattern." She turned to her team, already jumping into action. "Instead of forcing full power through all at once, we can create stable power points and expand from there. The children's section first, then life support, then the other areas. We'll gradually power up the ship in sections." The team worked quickly to modify their approach, and engineers adjusted the power filters to accommodate the new, more measured transfer of energy. Blue's team adapted their systems to accept this progressive power-up sequence. It was a race against time, but for the first time, hope flickered brightly in the control room. "Ready for the second test," Dr. Miller announced as the power flow to the children's section of the alien ship began. Dr. Miller stood in the control room, eyes fixed on the screens before her as she monitored the power flow. Earth's energy was being transferred into the alien ship's systems, but this time they were focusing on one part of the vessel, the children's section. The filters hummed steadily, working tirelessly to clean and tune the incoming energy so it matched the precise patterns the alien technology required. Dr. Miller's heart raced as the power levels steadily climbed. "Power at 20%, 30%, 40%, the technician's voice echoed in the control room, and the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone held their breath as the numbers on the display continued to rise. 50%. 60%, the technician continued, a note of cautious optimism creeping into his voice. Still no one dared to relax. Every technician, engineer, and scientist was focused, watching closely for any sign of failure. Then, through the viewport, something remarkable happened. Lights began to flicker on in the children's section of the alien ship. At first it was just a few faint glimmers, but then the lights grew brighter and more sections illuminated. Small faces began to appear at the windows, their expressions full of wonder and excitement. The children pressed their 4 hands against the glass, gazing out in awe at the lights and the humans who had made it all possible. Some of them even began to smile, their eyes sparkling with joy at the warmth and light that was now flooding their home. "It's working," Dr. Miller exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief and triumph. The power was flowing smoothly just as they had hoped. But she wasn't finished yet. She turned to Blue, the alien engineer who had been working alongside the human team, using his knowledge of their technology to guide the effort. "Blue, how's the power quality?" Blue's response came almost immediately. His lights flashed enthusiastically, and the translation system quickly decoded the message. "The systems are accepting the human power perfectly," Dr. Adams read aloud, her voice filled with relief. "They're stabilizing. Expanding life support sections," Dr. Miller announced, still processing the magnitude of what they had just achieved. They were scaling up the power transfer carefully, section by section, like a controlled wave that expanded outward from the children's area. As they watched the power flow, more sections of the ship came to life. "Power at 70%, 80%, 90%, the technician reported, and the excitement in the control room grew with every percentage increase. The lights across the ship flickered on like stars, gradually filling the night sky, each one a tiny victory for the human team. Captain James stood at the back of the room, his eyes fixed on the screens. He smiled, the relief washing over him. This was working, human ingenuity had cracked the code. "Send word to the other rescue ships," James instructed. "Tell them to prepare for full deployment. Get me Admiral Stone." The voice of Admiral Stone came through the comms, clear and firm as always. "Go ahead, Captain." "Sir, we've done it," James reported. "The power transfer works. But we'll need even more power for the main refugee ship. We need to scale up quickly." "You'll have it," Admiral Stone replied without hesitation. "Every nuclear plant on Earth is ready to go. Just say when." James turned his gaze back to the alien ship, watching the lights brighten and the life support systems come online. He saw the children now safe and warm, their faces pressed against the windows, their eyes full of gratitude. He turned to Blue, who had been working tirelessly with the humans, and then to Dr. Miller, who had solved what seemed like an impossible problem with simple human ingenuity. She had found a way to harmonize Earth's power with alien systems, making their rescue mission possible. "Tell Earth to be ready in 6 hours," James said, his voice steady. "We're going to power up the main ship, all 50,000 refugees." As the message went out to Earth, Dr. Miller took a deep breath and turned to her team. "Okay, people," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "We just played our first successful quantum concert. Now it's time for the symphony." Blue's lights flashed rapidly, signaling his approval of the plan. It had become his favorite human phrase, "Let's get to work." The rescue mission had passed its first real test, but now came the biggest challenge of all, powering up the massive main refugee ship before time ran out. The main ship was enormous, nearly the size of a small city. As Earth's power grid reached its maximum output, Captain James watched from the Mercy's bridge as energy began flowing into the colossal vessel. "Power transfer at 10%, Dr. Miller reported from the control center, her voice tense but hopeful. "All filters functioning, power flow steady." Blue and his engineering team worked alongside the human engineers, carefully monitoring the systems. Their light signals indicated steady progress, and sections of the huge ship began to illuminate one after another. 20%, 30%, came the reports, each one a sign that their plan was working. The first few sections were now lit up completely, and there was a ripple of excitement among the team. But suddenly the alarms blared and red lights flashed across the control room. Dr. Miller's face fell as she saw the power surge warnings on her screen. "Power surge," she shouted, her voice tinged with panic. "The main trunk line is overloading." Through the viewport, James watched in horror as darkness spread across the refugee ship like a wave. The emergency lights flickered to life briefly, but then they too failed. The power transfer had completely failed. "Status report," James demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "Main power filters are burned out," Dr. Miller replied, her voice tight with frustration. The energy pattern became chaotic. "It's worse than before. We've damaged their power reception systems." Blue's light signals flashed frantically, and Dr. Adams quickly relayed the translation. "Life support is failing in all sectors. Backup systems are critical. Estimated time remaining, 12 hours. The situation had taken a turn for the worse. They had less time than they had thought, and the damage to the alien ship's power reception systems only added to the pressure. As James listened to the growing panic in the voices coming through the translators, he could feel the weight of 50,000 lives pressing down on him. Dr. Miller turned to him, her face pale with frustration. "What are our options?" James asked, his voice steady despite the growing crisis. She stared at her screens, frustration evident on her face. "The power pattern is too complex for this scale. It's like trying to play a symphony with millions of instruments. One small mistake and everything falls apart." Just then a new voice came through the comms. "Captain, this is Engineer Pete from Maintenance. Request permission to speak." "Go ahead, Pete," James replied, his voice sounding almost relieved at the prospect of a new idea. "I was a submarine engineer before I joined the space service," Pete explained. "This reminds me of something. When our nuclear sub lost power, we used something simple to restart it." James leaned forward. "What did you use?" "A battery, sir," Pete replied. "Just one battery. We used it to power up the crucial systems one by one, building a stable power base. Once we had that, we could bring the big generators online." Blue's lights flashed rapidly as the translation came through. His team began gesturing excitedly. "That's it," Dr. Miller exclaimed. "We've been thinking too big. Instead of one massive power transfer, we start small. Can your systems store power in smaller units?" Blue's response was immediate, and his lights indicated that their ships had thousands of small power storage cells, currently empty. "Here's the plan," Dr. Miller announced, her voice calm and decisive. "We'll use Earth's generators to fill their storage cells one at a time, like charging millions of tiny batteries. Once we have enough charged cells, they can power up their own systems." James nodded, his mind racing. "We've got this. Let's get started." The teams worked quickly to implement the new plan. Human engineers modified the power filters for smaller, more precise transfers of energy, while Blue's crew reconfigured their storage systems to accept the smaller units of power. The first alien power cell began charging. "First cell charging," Dr. Miller reported. "Pattern is stable." The first power cell filled with Earth's energy, properly filtered and tuned to the right frequency. Then another and another. The process was slow but steady. Each power cell that charged brought them one step closer to solving the crisis. The mission was far from over, but with this new approach, there was hope. The alien systems were starting to accept the energy, and the race to save the 50,000 refugees had entered its most critical phase. Dr. Miller watched as the power cells continued to charge, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and awe. Pete's simple solution had worked. The alien ships were slowly coming back to life, their power systems steady and stable. The team had transformed the chaos into a steady rhythm, just like a symphony, as they carefully distributed the charged cells across the fleet. The power transfer, which had once seemed impossible, was now a success. She smiled at Pete, who was standing nearby, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "Pete, you're a genius," Dr. Miller said, her voice filled with gratitude. The simple idea of charging individual power cells had proven effective. Over the next hour, thousands of alien power cells were charged, and Blue's team began distributing them throughout the massive ships. With each passing minute, more and more sections of the ships lit up. The once dark and quiet vessel now glowed with steady light, section by section. The giant ships were coming back to life, saved by the simplest of human ideas. Pete stood by, his voice a soft whisper. "Sometimes the oldest tricks work best." Dr. Miller chuckled quietly, but the gravity of their success wasn't lost on her. She watched as the alien refugees, once facing certain doom, now had a chance at survival. Blue's final light signal of the hour was translated, and the message filled Dr. Miller with pride. "Our people will remember this day. How humans taught us that bigger is not always better." The words hit home, and for a moment, Dr. Miller allowed herself to feel a deep sense of accomplishment. They had found a way forward, not by trying to use grand, complicated methods, but by focusing on the simple things that worked. Now they had to continue their work and ensure the entire fleet was fully powered, but for the moment, the crisis had been averted. Hours passed as Earth's power grid worked tirelessly to charge thousands of alien power cells. Captain James, standing in the bridge of the Mercy, watched as the transport shuttles moved between the ships, carefully distributing the charged cells. He was proud of how well the operation was running. His eyes swept over the massive fleet as the lights across the ships grew brighter. Slowly they were making progress. "Status report," Captain James called out, his voice steady. Dr. Miller checked her screens, a quiet smile forming on her lips. "Main refugee ship at 75% power. Life support fully restored. 10 smaller ships already at full power." "Good," Captain James replied, his tone satisfied. "We're going to make it." As the team continued to work, Blue approached the window, his 4 hands making gentle gestures toward Earth, which was barely visible as a bright dot in the distance. His lights flashed, and Dr. Adams quickly translated his message. "Your people gave everything to help strangers from the stars. We did not expect such kindness." James nodded, his expression calm but proud. "That's what humans do," he replied simply. "We help." Before anyone could respond, the alarm sounded from the science station. Dr. Adams rushed to check the readings, her voice urgent. "Captain, I'm detecting energy spikes from Jupiter's magnetic field. The giant planet loomed nearby, its massive storm swirling in the distance. As the planet's powerful magnetic field began to interfere with their power transfer equipment, Dr. Adams's voice grew more concerned. The interference is growing. It's affecting our ability to maintain stable power transfer. James's expression hardened. How many ships still need power? 4 ships, Dr. Miller reported, her voice tight with concern. But the magnetic storm is growing stronger. Our power filters are struggling to maintain stable patterns in the interference. Blue's lights flashed urgently, and the translation came through. The message was grim. Those ships carry 5,000 people, including our youngest children. James didn't hesitate. Dr. Miller, can we move the remaining ships away from Jupiter? Dr. Miller looked at her screens, calculating quickly. Their engines are still offline. They'd have to be towed. Then that's what we'll do, Captain James decided. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All rescue ships, prepare for emergency towing operations. We're moving those ships to safer space. The human rescue fleet immediately sprang into action. Tow cables shot out from the ships, connecting to the powerless alien vessels. Blue's crew worked alongside the humans, helping to secure the connections. The magnetic interference continued to increase, and Dr. Adams's voice crackled over the comms, warning them. The storm will peak in 20 minutes. James nodded, determined. Begin towing operations. Now. The engines of the rescue ships roared to life as they slowly began pulling the massive alien vessels away from Jupiter's influence. Progress was agonizingly slow. The planet's magnetic field was intense, and the radiation made communication difficult. They were reduced to basic light signals to guide the operation. 10 minutes to storm peak, Dr. Adams warned. James watched as the rescue ships struggled against the load. The warning lights on their engine panels flashed, signaling that they were pushing beyond safety limits. The strain was visible and the tension was rising. Captain, called the engineering station. Our engines can't take much more of this. Just then Blue's lights flashed rapidly. Dr. Adams quickly translated. Look, the powered ships, they're coming through the magnetic storm. James's eyes widened as he saw it. The alien ships that had already been restored were moving alongside the rescue operation. They had extended their own towing beams and were helping the human ships pull the remaining vessels out of harm's way. It was a sight of unity, alien and human ships working together to save lives. Dr. Miller gasped. Working together, human and alien ships are driving the powerless vessels away from Jupiter's dangerous influence. The magnetic interference began to drop as the ships moved to safer space. Once they were free of Jupiter's magnetic field, the power readings returned to normal levels. Resume power transfer, James ordered. The charging process began again, but this time, it was even more efficient. With both human and alien crews working side by side, the power cells were charged and distributed with perfect efficiency. There were no more setbacks, no more interruptions. It was as if the entire operation had found its rhythm. Final ship approaching full power, Dr. Miller reported. The last vessel's lights are coming on, section by section. The whole fleet is coming back online. Blue's lights flashed brightly, and the translation came through loud and clear. All ships restored. All people safe. Then, in a final message that seemed almost impossibly poignant, Blue added, thanks to human wisdom. Captain James stood in the control room, watching as the fleet glowed brightly with steady light, 15 ships now fully powered. Mission accomplished, he said quietly. He turned to Dr. Miller, a smile forming on his lips. Send word to Earth. Let them know. The response from Earth was immediate. Admiral Stone's voice came through, filled with pride. Well done, everyone. Now, let's help our new friends properly repair their quantum drives. But then Blue's lights flashed once more, and the translation took everyone by surprise. We have discussed this among our people. We request permission to stay near Earth while we rebuild. We have much to learn from humans. James looked at his crew, then back at the now glowing fleet of alien ships. He smiled. I think that can be arranged. Turning to the crew, he said, let's take them home. The fleet, now fully powered and united, began its journey toward Earth. Humans and aliens, working together, had saved 50,000 lives. And together they were now headed toward a future of shared knowledge and cooperation. The alien ships glided through space, their engines humming steadily as they left the looming presence of Jupiter behind them. The once chaotic journey, fraught with danger and uncertainty, now seemed like a distant memory. Ahead of them, the bright blue of Earth glistened against the black canvas of space, a symbol of the new partnership that had taken root between humanity and the alien species. As the fleet flew together, the alien vessels flashed their running lights in a synchronized pattern, a beautiful display of unity that filled the cosmos with light. Dr. Adams stood at the observation window in the newly constructed International Space Cooperation Center, watching the ships move in harmony. Her eyes traced the movements of the vessels, noticing the elegant dance they performed in space, a sharp contrast to the once fractured and divided world they had come from. She could feel the weight of the transformation in the air, the palpable sense of hope and accomplishment. Her hand hovered over her console, and the translated message from the alien fleet appeared on her screen. She read it aloud, her voice tinged with emotion as she spoke the words that resonated deep within her heart. Today we are not just survivors. Today we are family. It had been 6 months since the Great Rescue mission, and in that time the once divided alien fleet now orbited Earth peacefully. The massive ships were undergoing repairs to their quantum drives, and their power systems, once in danger of failing, were fully restored. The human and alien teams had worked side by side, their differences no longer an obstacle but a strength. Captain James stood beside Dr. Adams at the window, watching the peaceful fleet below them. It was a sight he never imagined he would see, but it was one he had worked tirelessly to make a reality. "It's amazing how much has changed," Dr. Miller said, joining him at the window. Her voice was full of wonder as she observed the harmony between the two species. It was hard to believe that just months earlier, they had been facing the overwhelming challenge of saving these ships, and now they were working together as equals. Below them, in the main hangar of the station, human and alien engineers worked together, each team learning from the other. Blue, now the official alien ambassador to Earth, entered the room, his luminous lights flickering in greeting. His universal translator, developed with human help, converted his alien language directly into speech, making communication between the species seamless. "The council meeting is ready to begin," Blue announced, his voice steady and clear through the translation. Captain James nodded, turning toward the large meeting room where human and alien leaders had gathered to discuss the future. It was a historic moment, one that Captain James had long hoped for but never thought possible. Admiral Stone stood at the podium, preparing to address the assembly. "Today marks a historic moment," Admiral Stone began, his voice filled with pride and conviction. "The first graduating class of the Joint Space Rescue Service?" The audience fell silent, watching as 20 humans and 15 aliens stepped forward in unison. They wore new uniforms specially designed to accommodate both species, a symbol of the cooperation that had brought them together. Captain James felt a swell of pride in his chest as he watched Pete, the former submarine engineer, step forward. Pete had been one of the first to lend his expertise during the rescue, and now, seeing him standing as part of this new joint force, James could hardly contain his pride. Admiral Stone continued, his tone filled with hope for the future. "These crews represent something unprecedented. They combine human ingenuity with alien technology. They prove that different species can work together to save lives, and together we will continue to do so." Blue stepped up to speak next, his glowing form shimmering as he addressed the gathered crowd. "6 months ago," he began, "we believed our advanced technology made us superior. We were wrong. Humans taught us that simple solutions often work best, that backup systems save lives, and that helping others matters more than pride." He gestured to the graduates. "These teams will patrol space together, ready to help any vessel in distress, whether human, alien, or unknown. We call them the Jupiter teams to remember where this partnership began." As the ceremony concluded, Captain James walked with Blue through the corridors of the station. They passed workshops where humans were teaching the aliens about mechanical backup systems, while the aliens were showing humans how to understand the complexities of quantum technology. The exchange of knowledge was both practical and symbolic, showing that cooperation extended beyond just the rescue mission. It was a new way of life. "Your children's section is doing well?" Captain James asked, a smile tugging at his lips. "Very well," Blue replied, his voice tinged with pride. "They love learning from human children. Yesterday they played something called soccer in zero gravity." Blue laughed, a sound that was still new to him, but one he had learned from the humans. As they approached the station's new rescue control center, the atmosphere was one of controlled activity and excitement. The screens in the center displayed the positions of the patrol ships, human vessels equipped with alien sensors, alien ships carrying human-style backup systems. It was a perfect blend of the two species' strengths, a testament to what they had achieved together. "First emergency call coming in," an operator announced. "Ship in distress near Mars orbit." Captain James watched intently as the new rescue team sprang into action. Humans and aliens worked together with precision, their once separated technology and cultures now seamlessly integrated into a unified whole. "Take us out," Pete called from the bridge of their ship. His mixed crew, humans and aliens, moved efficiently, their ship, Unity, heading toward Mars. James observed the coordination, the fluidity with which the teams moved. The complexities of their mission were no longer obstacles, they had become routine. Blue turned to James, his voice thoughtful. "Before we met humans, we believed advanced technology solved everything. Now, we understand that it's not about how complex your solutions are, it's about helping others." James nodded in agreement, his eyes fixed on the view ahead. "And sometimes, the best solutions are the simplest ones." Together, they watched as more ships launched from the station for their training missions. Each one carried the new rescue service logo, a human hand and an alien hand clasped together, set against a starfield, symbolizing the unity they had achieved. "The universe is vast," Blue said quietly, gazing out at the stars. "Many more ships will need help. Many more species to meet." James smiled, his voice steady and full of conviction. "And we'll be ready for them. Together." In the distance, Jupiter shone faintly, a quiet reminder of where it all began. But Earth now glowed brighter, surrounded by a mix of human and alien stations, with ships of both designs moving between them. The crews were no longer divided by origin, they were united in their mission. The rescue of the alien fleet had changed everything. Humanity had proven itself not through power or advanced technology, but through compassion, creativity, and determination. The aliens had learned that sometimes, the oldest and simplest solutions worked best. As Captain James prepared to board his ship for another patrol, he reflected on those desperate hours near Jupiter when they had saved 50,000 lives, not by quantum physics, but by simple human ingenuity. "Ready for patrol, Captain?" his mixed human-alien crew asked, their faces eager and full of determination. "Ready," Captain James replied, his gaze steady as he looked at their faces. Some human, some alien, but all united in purpose. "Let's go help someone." The ship moved away from Earth, carrying its message of cooperation to the stars. Behind them, the next class of rescue teams began their training, learning from both species and preparing to face whatever challenges space might bring. Humanity had done more than rescue a fleet. They had built a bridge between the stars, a bridge that would stand as a beacon of hope for all the species they would encounter in the future.